Here I have a flat rock that I've heated up on the fire. You want to get it hot, but not too hot. I'm going to be making a torch. Here's a bunch of pine sap that I gathered from an injured pine tree. Put it onto the hot rock. This is for if you don't have a tin can or something to heat the sap in. Then I'll take a cattail seed head and saturate it with the liquefied sap. So it's good and covered in sap. Now I'll let it cool down. I like to make these and keep them in my pack after they cool down and dry and use them as fire starters for when I need them. Or you could even use these as a torch if you need to see at night. When you're ready to use it, just give it a light and it'll light up pretty quickly. This will burn bright and hot for about 15 to 25 minutes or so. And if you have a bunch of them made beforehand, you can keep switching them out as they finish burning. Just don't do this on a very dry day and be careful of the dripping sap. Here's a quick way you can improve your matches. You can waterproof them and add a flame extender at the same time by coating them with pine sap. I'll pour some water over top of it and the sap will repel the water and keep the match dry. Just like you could also do with wax, but if you don't have wax on you, this is a natural alternative. Now you just made your own storm-proof matches. Pine sap is very flammable, so it'll make your matches burn for longer and with a much bigger flame. It's also windproof. You can get clean drinking water from grapevines. In the spring, these vines are full of water. The water is pulled up from the ground and filtered through the vine, and it's good to drink. I'll cut a notch in the bottom of this vine, and the water will start pouring out. Just make sure to properly identify your vines, and you'll get a good amount of water in no time. Here's a great way to keep the mosquitoes away. I have this empty soup can, and with my multi-tool, I'm going to poke some holes around the bottom section. This will allow for more airflow into the can. So I have holes all around, about an inch from the bottom. Then I'll hang it up. Now I'll take some hot coals from my fire and put them in the can. One of the best ways to keep bugs away is with smoke, especially smoke that has a scent that bugs don't like pine. So I have some white pine needles here that I gathered, and I'll put them in the can with the hot coals. They'll smolder in there and give off a good pine-scented smoke. And I think it smells pretty good, but the bugs don't. I like to make a few of these and surround my camp with them on the upwind side of the campsite. That way the smoke will be blowing toward me. Or you can take this with you if you're on the move, kind of like a bug repelling torch. Just make sure it's good and secure on your stick so it doesn't fall and spill. Another natural bug repellent is yarrow. You can make a smoker using this like you would pine as well. Another way to use it is to crush it up and rub it all over your skin and clothes. It works just like bug spray. It has a nice fresh scent just like pine. So as an added bonus, you smell nice. You can start a fire with a plastic water bottle and a dry tinder bundle. Here I have dead dry grass with crushed cedar bark in the middle. And you'll need a sunny spot for this too, because I'm going to use the water bottle like I would a magnifying glass. You can see I burned a hole in this leaf, but cedar bark works really good for creating an ember. I processed it by crushing it in between my hands, which will create finer fibers that can be ignited easier. Also, darker colored tinder works best for this. You just want to concentrate the sunlight into one spot for about a minute or two, and you'll get an ember. So at this point, you just want to keep giving it air, making the ember bigger and bigger until it bursts into flame. There you go. Now you can start a fire with the sun and a water bottle to survive or impress your friends. You can use a plastic tent stake as tinder. It's something that you might already have on you that you can use in an emergency to start a fire. So I'm going to make kind of a tent stake feather stick. A little more challenging than making a feather stick out of a piece of wood. I'm just scraping very fine shavings off of the plastic. Or you could also use the back of your knife or a rock to scrape off fine shavings. Not the prettiest work of art, but it doesn't have to be. You can use these like you would a fire starter for getting a fire going in bad weather conditions, or if everything in the forest is wet and you're having a hard time getting a fire going. This will burn pretty good for a few minutes. Now here's a way to boil water if you don't have a metal pot or a pan. I'll take some rocks and put them on my fire to let them heat up. You want to use dense rocks found on dry land so they don't explode from the heat. And just to be safe, it's a good idea to cover them up with logs just in case that does happen. And I made my fire near this dead fallen log because I'm going to use the hot coals from my fire, dump them on the log so I can burn a bowl shape into it. If for some reason you don't have a knife or any other carving tools on you, you can make a bowl into wood using this method. So now I have a little fire going on top of this log. And every now and then you want to help it along by scraping it with a piece of wood or a rock. This is a long process. It would be a much shorter process if I had a dry log. This one's pretty damp, but sometimes you gotta work with what you have. So I'll clean it up with this sharp rock, and now we have a nice looking bowl. Now if you don't have a container to transport water, a piece of clothing could work. So I'll get this t-shirt good and soaked with water, and then I'll wring it out into the bowl. After a few trips to the creek and back, it's full. Now I'll dig my rocks out of the hot coals. These rocks have a little ash on them, probably fine, but to be safe, I'll rinse them off. After they're rinsed off, I'll put them into the water. Then I'll repeat the process, adding one rock at a time. The water will get hotter and hotter with each rock that you put into it. Eventually, it'll come to a boil. There's some debate on how long to boil water for, but 1 minute of a good rolling boil is generally considered safe. Now get yourself a hollow stem from a non-poisonous plant, then drink the water. Here's an easy way to start a fire with an empty or broken lighter. Take some dandelion seed heads and pile them on top of a bundle of dead grass. Sprinkle some other dry tinder on, like crushed dry leaves. Even if a lighter is out of fuel, it still creates a spark. The spark will ignite the dandelion seeds, which will ignite the leaves, then will ignite the grass. Now I'm going to make charred punk wood, which can be used as a fire starter. Punk wood is just rotting wood that has a spongy texture. The woods are loaded with it, so it's not hard to find. And since it's porous and spongy, it's going to be loaded with water if it rained recently. If so, just throw it on your fire and it'll dry out. So while that dries out over the fire, I'm going to dig a hole in the ground. After the punk wood dries out, it'll start to burn, and that's what I want. But I don't want it to completely burn up, just want it to burn partially. When one side is good and charred, I'll flip it and let the other side char. Once both sides are good and charred, I'm going to take my tongs, take it out of the fire, and place them into the hole. Then once they're in there, I'm going to cover them up with dirt. This will keep the oxygen from getting to them and will stop them from burning. It's just like if you were to make charcoal with regular wood. Then I'll place my digging stick on top of them after I cover the hole so I don't forget where they are. After about a half an hour to an hour or so, I'll dig them back up. If you left them in there long enough, they'll be cool to the touch, and now you have charred punk wood. It works just like char cloth. It makes a great fire starter that you can keep in your pack for future use. It's great because it'll ignite very easily even with just a small spark. It'll even ignite from the sparks from this empty lighter. You can see it formed an ember really quick, then you just want to give it some air. Then eventually the whole piece will turn into a hot ember. So to get a fire started with this, you would get your tinder bundle, put it inside of it, then wrap it up. Just want to give it lots of air. And this grass is pretty damp, so it might take a minute to get going. But the ember dried out the grass and it lit into flame.